إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I begin by reminding myself first and all of my brothers and sisters that we should have taqwa in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which means that we should be aware of Allah, we should always be thinking about Him, we should be afraid of Allah, and we should protect ourselves from His anger and His punishment and His wrath. As He tells us in the Quran, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اتَّقُوا اللَّهَ حَقَّ تُقَاتِهِ وَلَا تَمُوتُنَّ إِلَّا وَأَنْتُمْ مُسْلِمُونَ. He says, do not, O you who believe, have taqwa in Allah as He's worthy of having taqwa in, and do not allow yourself to pass away except that you're in a state of Islam or a state of submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And before we begin, of course, on this blessed day of Jum'ah, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to send an abundance of peace and prayers upon our beloved Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sahbihi wa sallam. In Surah Al-Kahf, last month I spoke about the second story in Surah Al-Kahf, the man who owned two gardens. And I wanted to continue with the next story in Surah Al-Kahf. After the story of the man with the two gardens, Allah has a few ayat where He discusses Adam alayhi salam and Iblis. He talks about heaven and hell. He gives a reminder about the previous generations and the previous nations like Qawm Ad and Qawm Thamud that came before, and reminding people to reflect upon their lessons. And then Allah opens this story of Musa alayhi salam meeting another slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that had special knowledge. And as the story goes, Musa one day was preaching to Bani Israel, to the children of Israel. And one of them, as was the custom among some of them, asked him a very unique, probably unnecessary question. He asked him, Ya Musa, who is the most knowledgeable person on earth? And so Musa responded that he was, that Musa alayhi salam was the most knowledgeable person. And this makes sense given the fact that Musa was Kalimullah. He's one of the 5 greatest prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he's dealing with a people that have shown themselves to be difficult to deal with. They like to ask these questions and debate and try to find ways to undermine him. But Jibreel alayhi salam came to Musa immediately and asked him and rebuked him and told him, why did you speak without knowledge on this answer? There is a slave of Allah, and this is captured in the Quran. There is a slave of Allah that Allah has given rahmah to, and He has given a secret type of knowledge to that you don't have. And so Musa asks Allah for permission to go and study with this man. And Allah grants him permission. And Musa alayhi salam takes Yusha bin Nun, who was to be the prophet after him, and Allah gave him some instructions. He told him, you're going to travel towards a certain landmark. That landmark is where these 2 large bodies of water meet. I want you to travel in that direction. Go until you reach there. And you'll know that you've met Khidr, the man that I want you to meet. You're going to know that you meet him through some miraculous event that takes place. You're going to see something special. And so Musa alayhi salam and Yusha begin, and Musa tells Yusha before they leave, I want you to know, we're going to keep going. We're going to keep traveling. We're going to keep walking until we meet this man, or essentially until an eternity passes, meaning or we die. We're not going for leisure. We're not going for fun. This isn't about rest. We're going to keep pushing until we get there, or we have nothing left in the tank. And so they travel for however long Allah wills that they travel, and they come to the landmark. They come to the spot where the 2 bodies of water meet. And they put their stuff down and they sit down waiting to see what would happen. And it seems that they dozed off a little here and there. And while they are sort of out of it, Yusha notices something crazy happen. They had a fish in their package, and the fish that was dead came alive and bore a pathway through the sand to one of the bodies of water and then sat on top of the water for a little bit before it sunk in. But Yusha, given the fact that they were in and out of sleep perhaps, forgot to mention it to Musa alayhi salam. And so after waiting for a while, Musa decides, maybe Allah wants us to go a little further. So we're going to get up and we're going to go. And they begin to walk for a while, however long Allah wills that they continue to journey, until they had nothing left in the tank. And so Musa tells Yusha, look, we're exhausted, we're hungry, I'm not sure what the next step is, let's just sit down and eat. So why don't you bring out our food? And at that moment Yusha remembers, and he tells Musa, I completely forgot to tell you, but when we rested back there, the fish did some really weird thing. It came alive, it bore away through the sand, and took this really miraculous weird path into the water. So Musa says that was the sign we were looking for. So we have to go back. And they retrace their steps all the way back to that rock that they were resting at. And when they get there, they see a man. And Musa knows this is Khidr, the man that he was looking for. And so he greets him. He says, Assalamu alaikum. And Khidr says back, and how do you know this phrase, As-salam? And so Musa says, I am Musa ibn Imran. And Khidr says, you mean Musa of the Bani Israel? And Musa says, yes. Khidr asks him, what are you doing out here? And Musa tells him, I came so that I can learn from you. Would you allow me to travel with you for a period of time so that I can gain from some of the secret knowledge Allah has given you? And Khidr tells him, I don't think you're going to be able to be patient, O Musa, with what I know. Khidr is telling him here, I know who you are, Ya Musa. And Musa, for those of you who don't know, Musa was as strong as a personality as could exist. What today might be known as an alpha male, but without the toxicity, without the ugliness of it, Musa was a very powerful personality. The Rasul ﷺ was once commenting on Abu Bakr and Umar, and he said, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu is like Isa, with how soft-hearted he is. And Umar radiallahu anhu is like Musa, with his firmness and his strength. Musa punches the angel of death at one point and knocks his eye out. Musa is a very strong personality, a very strong, intense person. So Khidr is telling him, I know who you are, I know what you're like. I have knowledge that you don't even know the type of knowledge Allah has given me. I don't think you'll be able to wait it out. But Musa says, no, insha'Allah, I know. It's almost as if Musa is saying, I know it's going to be tough. Insha'Allah, I will be patient. But even if I lose my patience, I will never disobey you. So if I wrong you, you correct me, I'm going to listen to what you say. So Khidr agrees that Musa can travel with him, but he puts a stipulation. He tells him, you can travel with me on one condition. You are not to bring up anything unless I bring it up first. If I don't speak about it, you don't speak about it. And on this agreement, they go forward. They walk down the banks of the water for a little bit and they get to a boat. They want to get across. So they ask these humble fishermen, would you guys let us get across the water with you? And the fishermen let them on for free, out of their generosity. When they get on the boat, they're sitting on the dock, and Musa and Khidr witness a sparrow come and land and dip its beak into the water to drink. So Khidr says to Musa, he says, you have knowledge that I don't have. Allah has given you, Musa, some knowledge that I, Khidr, don't have. And Allah has given me, Khidr, some knowledge that you, Musa, don't have. And definitely at the time, there was probably no two people more knowledgeable than these two. And throughout history, there probably have not been, with the exception of maybe Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there probably has not been a human being with more knowledge than these two people. And Khidr says, but if you combine our knowledge and you compare it to the knowledge of Allah, it's like trying to compare the water that's left on this sparrow's beak to the whole body of water that it just drank from. Can you compare the two bodies of water? No, it's infinitesimal, that water that's on the beak. It's almost unrecognizable compared to this vast river or lake or whatever it was that they were on. And that is what he said, this is the likelihood of our knowledge combined with the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How vast is the knowledge of Allah and how perfect it is. And as Musa is reflecting on this statement, Khidr takes an axe and he breaks a portion of the boat until some water begins to seep in. And so Musa's in shock. And so he says to Khidr, are you trying to drown these people after they were just generous with us? And Khidr responds and says, didn't I say you weren't going to be able to be patient? So Musa says, I'm sorry. I've completely forgot. Don't hold me to it. I'm sorry, let's go on. When they finally reach land, they get down, they find some children playing. And Khidr takes the same axe, according to some narrations, and he kills one of the young boys. Musa this time doesn't forget. There's no way Musa can keep quiet at such what seems to him to be evil and oppression. And so he says, are you going to kill an innocent person? And so Khidr says, didn't I tell you, Musa, that you cannot be patient? I told you, you can't be patient. And Musa says, listen, I'm so sorry. If I do it again, we're done. If I do it again, you can expel me. And so they continue on until they come to a village. And they ask that village, can you give us some food and some drink? We're poor folk, we don't have anything. And the village refuses to give them anything. On the way out of the village, Khidr sees a wall that is about to topple over. It's deteriorating. And he begins to build it. And of course, Musa's trying to follow the rules. So he doesn't say, he doesn't do anything, just watches Khidr rebuild this wall. When Khidr is done, Musa just says as they're walking away, you could have asked them for food in payment for the work you just did. And Khidr says, that's it. The deal is over. You obviously can't wait. So I'm going to tell you the explanation of these three things that I did, and I didn't do them from me, they came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As for the ship, there was a tyrant that was stealing all of the boats that he can get his hands on. And so because they were generous with us and they were good people, I wanted to destroy their ship just enough that it wouldn't be desirable to the tyrant, but good enough for them to get to where they were going safely, and then they can rebuild it. And as for the young boy that I killed, his parents were righteous worshippers of Allah. And this boy was going to grow up to be a violent criminal. And we didn't want to cause his parents harm, so Allah chose to replace their son with a better son. And as for the wall, that town, that greedy town, had some orphans in it whose father had passed away, and he had left a fortune for them under this wall. If it had toppled over, the town would have learned of it and stolen it for themselves. And so we wanted to protect it for the children, so I rebuilt the wall, and this is the explanation for the stories that you couldn't wait on. Now, because we're going down this series of doing the stories of Surah Al-Kahf, I want to spend this khutbah and inshallah the next khutbah that I do here on this story, because there's too much. In fact, if I felt it would be good, I would do a third one on it, but we'll see if we get there. But I want to spend today just focusing on the primary message of this story. And then next time we'll go into the individual events, the ship, the boy, and the wall, separately inshallah. But I mentioned last time I was here that every story in Surah Al-Kahf deals with one of the major fitan, one of the major struggles, one of the major parts of this life. When it came to the companions of the cave, it deals with the struggle of religiosity and goodness and morality. When it came to the man with the two gardens, we dealt with the struggle of wealth. In a few months we'll do the story of Dhul Qarnayn, which is the struggle of power. And this story is the struggle of knowledge. It's the struggle of ilm. It's on that note that I want to begin. One of the things that jump out about this story from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is just how valuable knowledge is. It's so valuable that perhaps the second greatest, but definitely one of the 5 greatest human beings ever created by Allah, Musa alayhi salam. Knowledge was so valuable that he was willing to stop everything he was doing. The mission Allah commanded him to take on, he wanted to stop it, and Allah said it's okay for you to stop it so you can go gain some knowledge that you don't have. But more than that, Musa tells Yusha, we're going to keep going. I don't care if we pass out on the way. This is worth it. We're going to keep going until we get there, or essentially until our time on this earth is done. Knowledge is worth that much to me that I am willing to travel until I die to gain some knowledge that I don't have. But more than that, Musa alayhi salam is willing to lower himself to someone who is obviously not at the same level as Musa alayhi salam. Khidr most likely was another prophet of Allah, but he's not from among the greatest prophets of Allah. Musa definitely has an overall higher maqam than Khidr does. But because in this instance, he has knowledge that Musa doesn't have, Musa is willing to humble himself so much so that he asks Khidr's permission, can I follow you? Not, I'm going to follow you so I can learn something. Are you okay with me following you so that I can learn something from you? And then when Khidr tells him, you can't be patient, Musa says, maybe I can't, but I promise you, you are in charge, not me. Yes, I have a strong personality. Yes, I've just faced down Fir'aun and overcome him. Yes, I deal with Bani Israel all the time, and so my personality is what it is. But when it comes to you, I will listen and obey, no matter what comes. And then the entire story, you see the dynamic between Khidr and Musa. Khidr is the leader, is the teacher, and Musa is the student. This is the worth that Allah is trying to remind you and I about knowledge in this story. You know, Sayyidina Ibn Abbas says, knowledge is the purpose of humanity. In that ayah where Allah says, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, Abdullah ibn Abbas says, in this ayah, لِيَعْبُدُونَ means لِيَعْرَفُونَ or لِيَعْلَمُونَ, that they know Allah. Because the more you worship Allah, the more you will come to know Him. And the more you know Allah, the more you will want to worship Him. In fact, there is no greater pathway to the love of Allah and the worship of Allah than studying Allah and studying the message that He sent with His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. More so than that though, right before this story I told you Allah reminds us in the Quran about the story of Adam and Iblis. And this is not a coincidence. This is contextual. What made Adam worthy of being bowed to by the angels? There were two things. One was that Allah blew the ruh into Adam, and two was that Allah taught Adam, quote unquote, the names of all things. Al-asma'u kullaha. And what the ulama say, the mufassirun say, when Allah says He taught Adam the names of everything, what He meant was Allah taught Adam how to categorize and study. And this is what makes humanity different from all the other species that we know of on the earth. What makes us different is our ability to build on our knowledge generation to generation in succession. It's how civilization is built. It's how the human being as a species, on its own, we are one of the most vulnerable, least efficient, weak species on earth. But because of our ability to study and build tools, we become the most efficient and the most dominant species on earth. By our ability to know and study things. So Allah is reminding you and I the value that knowledge has in our world and in the akhirah. And we all live this out on a day-to-day basis. This hall right now is filled with students. The parents who are paying the money to put the students in the school do so knowing what will mold my child is the knowledge that they get in this life. And everyone in this hall has spent a good amount of their time and money in their life invested in trying to learn something, because we know the more we know, the more valuable we are to the world. Knowledge is one of the most powerful tools on this earth. And our ability to know and retain knowledge is one of the most powerful tools that every human being has been given. In fact, one of the things that differentiates between human beings and between groups of human beings, between civilizations and communities, is this ability to know and study and retain knowledge. It's why some governments and countries in the world are massively powerful while others are not so. And so the primary, or one of the obvious, it's like bright like the sun messages from this story is, never underestimate the power and the importance of knowledge and studying. And so my dear brothers and sisters, the first reminder to myself and everyone here is, it doesn't matter how old or young you are, how tired you are, how much you think you already know, try your best to commit yourself to learn every single day. And nothing is more important than learning about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. investing your time in learning Allah and knowing about Allah is even more valuable than investing your time in praying tahajjud at night or in fasting all year. Learning some of the book of Allah or some of the attributes of Allah will do so much more for you than any other form of ibadah can do. But the other thing that this story tells us about knowledge is that it tells us a lot about the realities of knowledge and what its impact should be on our life. So for example, I've always asked myself since I was a kid reading this story, why in the world does Allah mention this whole thing about the fish? It doesn't seem to make sense to me. What does this story of the fish have to do with what happens between Musa and Khidr? It's not vital to the story, it doesn't seem to be. It doesn't tell us anything about Yusha. Yusha disappears afterwards, he's not in the story anymore. And no matter how many tafasir I've read, no one comments on why this fish is there. So I have no clue if what I'm about to share is correct or not, in the sense that it's not backed by real scholars of this religion. But one of the takeaways I've taken away from this story is Allah is pointing out one of the realities of ilm. A part of the lesson to Musa here was, Allah told him, don't just assume that you have all the knowledge that you need. So go learn from Khidr. But here Allah is teaching us, one of the themes of the story is that things get forgotten. Yusha forgets. And then later Musa forgets. One of the things I think Allah is telling you and I is that even when you know something in general, don't depend on the fact that you're going to be able to know it forever. And so those of you who've memorized some of the Quran, how many of us may have memorized 2, 3, 4 ajza when we were kids, but because we haven't kept it up, it's no longer within our memory banks. It's no longer something we know. Musa in this story had a general understanding. I'm looking for a mu'jiza, I'm looking for a miracle. But he didn't know enough. Allah didn't allow him to know that part of ilm al-ghayb. Yusha knew it, but Musa didn't know that this happened because he was asleep. And so Allah is giving us a message here. Your knowledge, even things that you think your knowledge is complete about, will be incomplete. Even when you think your knowledge about something is perfect, you may forget it. And so never bank on the fact that you know enough or that your knowledge is perfect. The only perfect knowledge exists with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so one of the ulama, or many of the ulama say, one of the realities of ilm al-ghayb is things that are happening on this earth that you're just not privy to. So, for example, everyone in this hall knows what I'm saying in the khutbah right now. This is not ilm al-ghayb in the sense that it's not a hidden knowledge that Allah has kept from humanity. A part of humanity knows what I'm saying right now. The vast majority of humanity has no clue what happened here. And so even if you're the most knowledgeable person on earth today, you won't know what happened in this hall today. And so Allah is making a point to everyone. No matter how perfect you think your knowledge is, your knowledge can never ever be complete or perfect. That's one of the realities that comes out of the story. Another reality that comes out of the story though, is that if you want knowledge, it's going to take a serious commitment to it. And one of the words that Allah repeats often in the story after Khidr meets Musa is sabr. Are you going to have the patience, the consistency, the discipline, and the willingness to sacrifice so you can actually attain knowledge? It's going to require a lot. It's going to require time. It's going to require energy. It's going to require a patience with your own nafs, because it can get very frustrating to learn something you don't know, because by definition you don't know it yet. You have to learn it. And so it has to push you outside of your comfort zone in order for you to take in this new knowledge. And so the reality of knowledge is, the more you want of it, the more you're going to have to push down on yourself to get it. If you're not able to put in the work, you're not going to be able to grow it at all. But the last point that I'll mention before the break, one of the biggest realities of knowledge that Allah is telling you about is that knowledge, the way it should impact you, is that it should humble you and it should give you a beautiful character. So you find Musa alayhi salam, when he comes to Khidr, is Musa not a knowledgeable person? Musa probably is more knowledgeable than Khidr overall. But because Musa knows what he doesn't know, he's willing to humble himself so that he can learn more. And you find when Allah describes Khidr, He says in the Quran, we have given him rahmah, and we have given him from us a secret knowledge that we haven't given to anybody else. But primary to the knowledge is the rahmah Allah has put with Khidr. And they say, some of the ulama say, the reason why he's given the title of Khidr is that this rahmah manifested itself everywhere he walked. Everywhere he would go, trees would flourish, and people would feel better, and they would get more. And this comes out of the story that we'll get to in the next khutbah, inshaAllah. But one of the impacts of your knowledge should be, the more you know, the better your character should be. And the more you know, the more merciful you should be with everything else on this earth. وأقول قولي هذا واستغفر العظيم لي ولكم يا فوز المستغفرين استغفر الله. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. You know, last month when I gave the khutbah about the man with the two gardens, I mentioned that there was a greater context to that story as it related to Quraysh. So for those who don't remember or who weren't here, the genesis of the revelation of Surah Al-Kahf was that Quraysh went to a Jewish tribe and they asked some of their rabbis, give us some questions that we can ask Muhammad, we say sallallahu alayhi wasallam, so that we can prove that he's not a real prophet. We want to stump him. And so they gave him some questions. Among them, depending on the narrations that you take, ask him about the companions of the cave, and ask him about Dhul Qarnayn, and ask him about the ruh, the soul, and ask him about Yusuf and his brothers, alayhi salam. And so Allah revealed Surah Yusuf separately, and Surah Al-Kahf answering about the companions of the cave and Dhul Qarnayn. So what are these two stories in the middle doing? We mentioned last month the story of the man with the two gardens. That was contextually a message to Quraysh. What is stopping Quraysh from believing in Muhammad was their wealth and their sense of material power. We have tribes, we have money, we're the center of Arabia, we're everything. So we don't need to bow ourselves down to Allah. But what is this story here for? What it seems to be is that Allah, just as He gave Quraysh a message, Allah is giving Bani Israel a message at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Because what stopped Bani Israel, what stopped the Jewish tribes of Yathrib and in Yemen and in Khaybar from coming to the Rasul ﷺ was not their wealth. It was their sense that we have a special knowledge from Allah that Allah has given us. And for some of our cousins that still remains to be the case to this day. Allah was reminding Bani Israel, your knowledge that I've given you through your prophet should humble you, not make you arrogant. And He uses their prophet and our prophet Musa alayhi salam to make the point, to show them Musa, when Musa was told that there was someone else with knowledge, Musa went and humbled himself. Why aren't you humbling yourself to Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam when you know the truth is in front of you? And so the secondary message to the new community of believers, to you and I, is never let your knowledge of Allah, never let your sense that you're a Muslim make you arrogant. Never let it make you think that because I know something, I must be good enough now that I don't have to follow, or I don't have to know more, or I can't hear it from people. If your son or daughter reminds you of something, you follow it if it's the right thing. If someone younger than you, like me, is on the minbar, some of the brothers and sisters in here are definitely older and probably more knowledgeable than I am in general in the religion. It doesn't stop us from taking knowledge when it comes to us. Never let knowledge make you arrogant. That is the ultimate fitna about knowledge. Either knowledge will make you humble and merciful, or knowledge will make you arrogant and it will lead to your destruction. Now the last points that I mentioned, since we have just a couple of more minutes, I mentioned one of the things that it takes to generate knowledge in our lives, and that was sabr. And sabr in every essence of the word. Not just patience, but discipline, consistency, a willingness to sacrifice. But there are a few other tips that come out of this story that I'll share with you very quickly. One of them I've beat to death already, and that is the issue of humility. You know, every scholar I've ever sat with, one of the first lessons, every single one, without fail, when I sit with them, the first class is about how to actually learn. And one of the first things they say is, if you're going to have an ego, get out now. Because you have to be willing to admit, I don't know, and this person in front of me knows more than me. Because if you're not willing to admit that you don't know, you're never going to be willing to ask. And if you're not willing to ask, then there's nothing for you to learn. And so you have to be humble, if you seriously want to learn more. I mentioned the sabr. Number 3, find a mentor and try your best not to be self-taught. And being self-taught is the mode of the day. It's the modus operandi today. You go online, you look up a few websites, you Google something, I read a few articles here and there, even if they're contradictory to one another. I learned everything I need to learn. Now I can go online and type up something or put something on one of those social media things to make it look like I know something. If you're genuinely serious about learning something, especially the deen of Allah, find a teacher to sit with and learn from. Reading is fine in general, but it definitely does not give you the knowledge in the proper way that studying with someone who's been taught from someone who's been taught from someone will give you. And then lastly, when you come to ask questions, know the right questions to ask. Musa alayhi salam didn't know when to ask the questions and what questions to ask. And that's why he ultimately had to separate from Khidr. But this is a theme of the surah. And the companions of the cave, Allah mentions, some say that they're 5 and the dog is 6, and some say that they're 6 and the dog is 7th, and some say that it's 7 and the dog is 8th. None of them really know. It's not an important question. It's not an important question. When it comes to this story, you know the name Khidr is not even in the Quran. Allah didn't even care to identify the person. It doesn't matter. We don't even know what 2 bodies of water they're talking about. We don't know that. Allah is saying over and over again in the surah, worry about what matters. Learn what's going to give you value. Don't worry about the nonsense. So know what to ask and when to ask it. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make you and I from those who hear what is said and learn from it. May Allah grant us beneficial knowledge and benefit us from our knowledge. Oh, may Allah grant us the ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Oh Allah, all thanks and praise are due to you until you are pleased with us. And all thanks and praise are due to you if you become pleased with us. Ya Allah, forgive us our sins and accept from us our repentance. Oh Allah, we seek of you Jannah and we seek refuge in you from your hellfire. Oh Allah, send an abundance of peace and prayers upon Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. O you who turns the hearts, keep our hearts steadfast on Islam and make our hearts steadfast on Iman. Ya Allah, make beloved to us everything that is beloved to you and make hated to us everything that is hated to you. Ya Allah, we ask that you be with our brothers and sisters from China to Burma to Iraq to Yemen to Palestine to everywhere in between. Ya Allah, be with our oppressed brothers and sisters, those that we know of and remember and those that we have forgotten and the world has forgotten. And Ya Allah, let this community be a means of alleviating their suffering and not a reason for increasing their suffering. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen wa aqim as-salah.